A terrifying tale of hope and misery unfolded amid the beautiful jungles of Guyana, where the green canopy extends to the skies. It was a narrative that began with a captivating visionary named Jim Jones, promising a utopian ideal. The name Jonestown once reverberated with songs of togetherness and development, but it would soon become synonymous with a terrible catastrophe that destroyed lives and engraved itself forever in the annals of history. Journey into the depths of darkness with us as we read the Jonestown Massacre, the tragic story of Jim Jones and his People's Temple. A story of idealism became fanaticism, community turned compulsion, and a leader who had the power of life and death. Let's get started. The Jonestown Massacre is a chilling reminder of human frailty and the deadly power of deception. This awful catastrophe, in which over 900 lives were tragically lost, casts a dark shade over the 20th century. The massacre, at its root, was not an isolated episode, but rather a culmination of a complicated network of psychological torture, charismatic influence, and unbridled authority. Jim Jones, the mysterious leader of the People's Temple cult, wove in a tapestry of big promises and false hope that captivated his followers' hearts and minds. He enticed people into his flock with the promise of a better life, constructing a communal paradise that appeared to be a haven of equality and shared wealth. However, underneath the utopian facade was a terrible reality. The People's Temple evolved from humble origins in Indianapolis in 1955 into an empire of devotion and passion. Jones used language to encourage sacrifice, community life, and the rejection of private things with skill. This ideological capitulation prepared the ground for a warped power dynamic in which the vulnerable handed up power to an attractive leader. The seclusion and remoteness from normal culture allowed Jones to deepen his grip on his followers as the cult established itself in Jonestown, Guyana. The atrocities of the closing days are evidence of his power, a mass suicide organized by manipulation, terror, and indoctrination. Jones's vision of a utopian society promised his followers a better existence, a fantasy that pulled them in with optimism. But underneath the surface, this utopia was a mirage. Jones's true essence surfaced behind closed doors, a leader driven by paranoia and an unquenchable quest for control. Fear and intimidation were his tactics, securely grasping the minds of his followers. Jones had a terrible past behind his charming exterior. Allegations of violence and child abuse placed a terrible pall on his seeming goodness. In a critical step, he took his dedicated followers to Guyana in 1977, seeking safety from the American government's watchful eyes. Unfortunately, this voyage marked the beginning of a spiral into a nightmare world. Jones's sanity deteriorated when the People's Temple established itself in Guyana. His actions became increasingly unpredictable, planting seeds of mistrust among his devoted followers. Jones's desire for power drove him to convert the once promised refuge into a jail. He manipulated minds and dissolved relationships while demanding absolute obedience, cultivating an environment of isolation and subjection. In November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to investigate the operations of the People's Temple and the Jonestown camp. He was looking into claims that certain cult members were being detained against their will and were being subjected to physical and psychological abuse. He landed at Jonestown on November 17th and traveled to Guyana's capital, Georgetown, on November 14th. When Ryan was scheduled to depart the complex the next day, other temple members who wanted to go boarded his delegation's truck to accompany him back to the United States. Other members assaulted Ryan just as the truck was leaving the complex, but he escaped unharmed and the truck proceeded on with Ryan aboard. Members of the temple then began an attack on the airfield from which Ryan and his crew were to depart. 5 persons were murdered, including Ryan and 3 members of the press, while 11 others were injured. Jones issued radio commands for temple members outside the property to commit suicide in the aftermath of the shooting. Jones then carried out his revolutionary suicide plan at the complex, which members had previously practiced, in which a fruit drink had been mixed with cyanide, tranquilizers, and sedatives. It was squirted into the throats of newborns and children with a syringe before being ingested by adult members. Jones died as a result of a gunshot wound. Fewer than 100 temple members escaped the killing in Guyana. The bulk of survivors either defected that day or were Georgetown residents. Later, officials uncovered a stash of guns, hundreds of stacked passports, and $500,000 in US money. Millions more were allegedly put in foreign bank accounts. Following the event, the People's Temple officially disintegrated and declared bankruptcy towards the end of 1978. In the United States, just one individual, Temple member Larry Layton, was prosecuted for his role in the November 18 incidents. He was found guilty of conspiring and aiding and abetting Ryan's murder and the attempted murder of U.S. Embassy officer Richard Dwyer, and sentenced to life in prison before being freed in 2002. Charles Bikeman, another guy, pled guilty to the attempted murder of a small child and was sentenced to 5 years in jail in Guyana. It was one of the bloodiest single-day mass killings in U.S. history. The Jonestown Massacre serves as a stark warning of the perils of cults and the need for critical thinking. It's also a warning story about charismatic leaders' ability to deceive and dominate people. Following the massacre, there was intense public scrutiny of the People's Temple and Jim Jones. Many individuals were perplexed as to how such a catastrophe could have occurred. Some criticized the media for sensationalizing the People's Temple tale, while others condemned the government for doing too little to probe the group. There is no simple solution to why the Jonestown Massacre occurred. It was a complicated occurrence with numerous forces at play. However, Jim Jones was a violent and deceptive character who used weak individuals. Cults thrive on secrecy and control, and the People's Temple was no exception. They frequently isolate their members from the outside world and make leaving difficult. The Jonestown Massacre is a heinous crime that should never be forgotten. It serves as a reminder of the perils of cults as well as the need for critical thinking. It's also a warning story about charismatic leaders' ability to deceive and dominate people. Thanks for joining us, and please show your appreciation by liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing and clicking the bell symbol for more interesting information.